Welcome to Forever Seeking, the Notre Dame Prep Alumni Speaker Series presented by the Forever Saints Alumni Association. I'm Jenny Douglas, NDP's Annual Campaigns and Alumni Engagement Coordinator. This episode is sponsored by Gary and Lyric Knockin, parents of Katie 12 and Grayson 15. Notre Dame Prep is a diocesan Catholic high school located in Scottsdale, Arizona, founded on our three pillars of reverence, respect, and responsibility. As saints, we are forever seeking. This series features NDP community members who share how their involvement with NDP has impacted their lives and their ongoing search for wisdom, truth, knowledge, justice, and understanding. Today we are joined by NDP alumnus Luke Zaro, who will be hosting our fourth speaker, Lyn Richmond, former member of NDP's English faculty. Luke Zaro is the oldest of three boys, all of whom attended NDP. Luke graduated from NDP as salutatorian in 2012 and was a member of the boys' 2011 championship soccer team. He then attended Fordham University in New York City and graduated in 2016 with a bachelor's degree in international political economy. In 2019, he graduated from the University of Virginia with a law degree and a master's in legal history. Luke was admitted to the DC Bar last January and recently completed a clerkship on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. He is now an attorney at a law firm in Washington, D.C. Thank you, Luke, for joining us today.
Hello, NDP alumni. I'm Luke Zaro, and today I'm joined by Lyn Richmond, former member of NDP's English faculty. Lyn Richmond was born in Chicago, Illinois, and received her degree in English from Purdue University with additional coursework at Xavier and Arizona State Universities. Early in her teaching career, she worked in both underprivileged and parochial school environments. After teaching for 6 years, she accepted a position with a nationwide advertising company as a client advocate and copywriter. Eventually, she was transferred to Phoenix and spent 13 years as a regional manager serving clients in the Southwest. After the birth of her daughter, she worked as a homebound teacher for Scottsdale Unified School District and eventually went back to the classroom with the Diocese of Phoenix at Blessed Pope John XXIII. When it was announced that NDP was opening, Lyn saw this as an opportunity and challenge. The vision of Dave Gonzalez, our founding principal, as well as a team of dedicated teachers with the same core values and work ethic, kept her at Notre Dame until her retirement. Lyn continues to work part-time for SUSD, providing instruction to students unable to attend schools. She also keeps busy working as a private essay coach to students applying to college and graduate schools, as well as teaching summer writing seminars. Hello, Lyn. It's great to be with you today.
You too, Luke, and good to see you again.
Good to see you too. It's great to reconnect.
I know.
It's been a little while.
It has been.
But it's really great to see you.
Thanks.
So we're here to hear about you and your perspective and what you can offer to the students. So we'd love to start at the beginning. So did you always know that you wanted to be an English teacher? Why did you study English? How did you choose this profession?
Not really, no. I started out at Purdue University thinking about chemistry and dietetics. And once I was there and realized that I was not suited for that field, I decided that English was more the direction I wanted to go in, mainly because I'd really enjoyed it in high school and I had some excellent teachers, and reading was always a part of my life. Yeah, basically.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
So you go to Purdue, you study English, and what's your first job upon graduation?
Well, there's kind of an interesting story with that. This was in 1967, and there was a lot of riots at that particular time. Underprivileged areas were targeted, I think, and maybe targeted is the wrong word to use, but they were very underfunded, let me put it that way. And so there were a number of different riots at the time, and they occurred all over the United States, and Cincinnati had to be one of those places where I accepted a position to work in that area. So on the first day of school, as I walked into the parking, or drove into the parking lot, the policeman stopped me and said he'd like me to stand between he and the security guard so they could escort me into school. That was my first experience of being in that particular area, and it was an eye-opener. It really was. Life was completely different for those people than it had been for me, and even in college, when I experienced a lot of diversity, of course. This was a totally different situation, and trying to deal with students who were not up to grade level, students who were hungry, students who were exhausted. I was teaching high school at the time. Because they had worked another job and had just gotten off work and had come to school.
Wow.
Was a whole different world. So I was really kind of forced into trying to find means and ways to teach students with those kinds of disabilities, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, a couple things. It was such a remarkable moment in American history, and then there's so many unique challenges you face there, and you're a young teacher. You know, what were some of the things that you used to try to overcome those challenges and help these kids who, you know, had so many things going on?
Well, primarily it was, as far as the educational level was concerned, it was developing a program that I could deal with a classroom full of kids who were at different levels. So trying to deal with that, and then to find something that interested them was another challenge. Because at the time, you know, there was no internet. There was not a video. Everything that we did in the classroom was old school, as you would say. So, those were some of the challenges that we tried to face.
Wow. And just going back to that moment and, you know, teaching through that and being in a school which was majority of black students, if you see any parallels between that and what's been going on in our country, especially this summer?
Absolutely. Black Lives Matter is a real reflection on that particular period of time and how we haven't come very far, really, from the time that I started teaching in 1967 until today. So I'm very much an advocate of Black Lives Matter and hope that we can start to solve some of those problems today.
And was this true during your time at NDP and certainly back then? You know, teachers engaging with students with social and cultural issues of the time, was that something that would come up regularly, and how did you kind of incorporate that into your class?
The culture at our school at that time was predominantly black teachers, although there were a number of us who were not, but we just dealt with it as it came, you know, and once the riots sort of subsided, we really didn't have a whole lot of problems from that time on. And it was a different period of time, Luke. It really was. These were the days where, as I was coming into school, if I saw a student who was standing and waiting for the bus, I could ask him, would you like a ride? And he could get in the car and ride with me. We wouldn't dare do that, you know, today. I had students who would come to my house and I could feed them dinner. That was not something that you could do today either. So there were a lot of leeways that we had at that particular period of time. Yeah,
that's great. Well, and what a remarkable way to start your career. What a time. Certainly a lot of challenges
certainly.
with that.
I learned so much about life and what it takes to be a good teacher. You know, so it was an eye-opening situation.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Great. And then I know you worked for an advertising company.
Correct.
It sounds like it was a gap between them before you returned to teaching. Did you know you always wanted to become, return to teaching and get back with the students? What brought you?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting because the job that I had a lot of it was primarily sales and working with clients and writing copy for them and so on. And I always found myself in that teaching situation, you know, where I had to explain why we're using this source and what kind of direction we wanted to take and how we were going to sell the product or how we were going to get people to work for the company and so on and so forth. So I was always kind of teaching, you know, but that kind of business wears on you. And after 13 years, it was time for me to leave. And at that particular period of time then is when we adopted my daughter. So it was a natural kind of change for me. Yeah.
Well, thankfully for the whole NDP community, for me, as one of your former students, for all of us, you found NDP right at its opening. If you could speak a little bit about that, how did you find NDP? What drew you to the school and led to your fantastic tenure here? Yeah,
I had been working at, I guess it's St. John Pope, or St. Pope John, or whatever it is at this point, instead of Pope John the 23rd, which is what it was when I was teaching there. And when I had taught there, I taught there for 3 years, and I had taught junior high school, which really is not my forte. I really like to teach students that are a little bit older than that. So I spent 3 years there, very happy years. It was good to get back to teaching and good to refresh myself and techniques and so on and so forth. And then we got the news that Notre Dame was opening. And I jumped at the chance, not because I really was unhappy at Pope John, but basically because it was a high school environment. So when it came over to interview with Dave Gonsalves, we just hit it off. He and I had the same philosophy about education. His emphasis on reverence, respect, and responsibility, and trying to develop those themes were just phenomenal. And it was a very short, or a very small group of teachers at the time. We started with 15 teachers here at that point in time. So we really bonded, and we all had the interest of developing the school in mind.
That's great.
Yeah, so it worked out perfectly well.
No, that's fantastic. And you mentioned the 3 R's. Obviously, the school still celebrates those values today.
Yes.
If you could speak a little bit about, what they meant to you, how you understood the values, and how you were able to incorporate that into your curriculum.
Okay. Basically, I think reverence is sort of obvious, but it really involves, for me, what or how a student looks at their spirituality. And the Catholic faith does such a great job of instilling morals in people that I just felt that sense of trying to get that into the curriculum was important. Respect, of course, is something that teenagers have to learn because they don't tend to be some really nice people sometimes. And so not only respecting others, but respecting yourself. And so, trying to work along those lines in the curriculum. Responsibility, I think, is an aspect of growing up. And it's kind of a bridge, the way that I look at it, a bridge between, listening to what your parents have to say and following their guidelines, but yet also learning how to respect yourself, taking responsibility for what you do, and realizing that you're in charge of your education right now, and it's up to you to be able to develop that idea of how you're going to approach learning. So that basically was it. So what I tried to do is, in terms of the curriculum, was to take those aspects. What we did when we started to develop the curriculum, which was an awesome thing to be a part of, to come into a school that had no English curriculum developed at all, and to develop that the way I wanted to do it, and to develop it the way the team wanted to do it, because I had a great team of teachers here, I'm sure
There are many great teachers here.
From Miss Carteau as a freshman teacher, all the way to Miss Treadway as a senior. So we had a great group of people. So we tried to develop the curriculum in such a way that we looked at reading and we looked at writing, basically, with developing reading skills, excuse me, meaning that we wanted to be able to develop a student's comprehension. We wanted to be able to develop their ability to analyze. And so beginning from the very first, the freshman year, we took that aspect of responsibility and put that directly on the student and help them develop that. So in our reading program, for example, I can only speak to the AP program because that's what I taught mostly. We were looking at writers like Martin Luther King. We were looking at Lars Eigner. We tried to do nonfiction and fiction. Death of a Salesman, for example. Those are the kinds of things that we presented to our students, and then looked at them as being able to, or looked for them to be able to develop the ability to be able to recognize what the author was getting at, what were some of the values that this particular piece was trying to, the author was trying to express, and relate those all to reverence, respect, and responsibility. And then as far as the writing was concerned, we took some of those same principles and, of course, focused on grammar, starting students with, evaluating students, I should say, at where they stood in their ability to be able to write properly, and making sure that their grammar skills were up to par, and then their ability to construct a well-organized paragraph and then a well-organized essay. And then we tried to take that in the later years, in junior and senior year, and apply some of those analysis to being able to express and that analysis of that particular work, whatever the theme was or whatever the concept or idea was that the student wanted to express and the teacher was asking, to be able to develop those in writing, you know.
Well, I think it was a very effective means of doing that. I know, at least speaking for myself and many of my classmates, we became significantly better writers, especially after taking your class.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. One thing in particular I remember is writing paper after paper, looking at purpose, technique, and effectiveness, and really starting for the first time in my life, like thinking about why did the author write this the way he wrote it or she wrote it? What was the goal? What were they trying to, you know, what message were they trying to send?
Right.
Was it effective? Is this something I could use later in my own piece of writing? If you could just speak a little bit to that, I think that's a valuable skill set that certainly helped me in life.
And so what I would ask you, Luke, is was that something that you could utilize from the time that you learned it in what you were doing, not only in college, but also in your work?
Yeah, I mean, certainly going to law school and now as an attorney, I mean, that's very valuable. You know, looking at what source of information is this coming from? Is it coming from a court? Is it coming from, you know, an institution? Or is it just coming from an individual who may have a very good point? And, you know, looking at how the argument is built, is it effective? Is it something I can use in my work later? And then also looking at, you know, the validity of the message that's being made. You know, if this is you know, something that should be believed or should be doubted or something that should be researched further. You know, I think that's something that in today's day and age, whether it's, you know, fake news or disinformation, there seems to be a lot of people who are concerned with the legitimacy of sources.
Right.
And I think that was a great approach. It's helped me try to navigate everything that's going on. You see so many things that are put out there. So I'm very thankful for having your class and having that skill set.
That's great.
Yeah.
You know, so some of the other things that we try to express too is when you're looking at a source, because you brought that up, when we're looking at a source, how reliable is that source? We want to start with that because there's so much out there on the internet right now. When you were here, did we still have a library?
We did.
We did. Okay.
It was still used. It was the end was you could see it coming, but we still have trips to the library.
Right, exactly. You know, we don't find libraries like we used to anymore, and we used to require you to have so many printed resources and so many magazine resources, and we used to require you to be able to account for those. So, you know, but those sources had to be reliable. You couldn't just make them up or use wiki, as we used to say. So we couldn't really allow you to do that. So not only did they have to be reliable, but they had to be sufficient. You had to have enough of those resources that backed up your position or looked at both sides of an issue, whatever you were doing, compare, contrast, or whatever. So you'd have to be able to do that. And were they representative of what you were trying to say, you know, on topic, making sure that, you know, you're not straying too far from what was going on. And I think in today's world, we're talking about things like Black Lives Matter that we mentioned before, or COVID, for example. And all of those issues that we're looking at right now, especially the political side of our world right now, all of those issues really require us to research and to find out what's really true, because there's so much information out there, as you said, misinformation and disinformation, so much out there right now that we have to really insist that our students look at reliable information, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, and it's a valuable, toolkit, skill set that you've given students to be able to do that. And I think one of the other challenges too is just how quickly news comes in, or disinformation, whatever it might be, whether it's Twitter, the stories can now spread faster than ever before. And, that approach and researching the issue and thinking about something, there's a slowness to that process, and it's not as,
exactly
as sexy as, whatever the latest tweet or hashtag is.
Yeah, exactly.
Seeing the value, that's important, I think.
When you were in school at that point, I don't mean college, although I'm talking about high school, as our students are here, what was it that you used? You went to the library, right?
I think the closest thing we had was Wikipedia, which maybe had been edited.
That's right, exactly. So, the changes that were made, when I first started to teach, we had no computers. Everything that I had to type out, and I typed it out on a long sheet of paper, about 9 by 11, or 9 by 14, I mean. And as you typed it out, it would put little holes in this green sheet of paper, and if you made a mistake, you had to take this liquid and kind of white it out, and then we put it on this machine that rolled off the copies. So we were talking about back in those days, there was nothing like what we have today, and it's a shame, because I would have loved to have had all those things back then. It would have made it a lot easier. I can't tell you how many times I retyped an assignment that I had to give to a student. But at any rate, it has changed dramatically, I think, since then. Some for the better and some for the worse. But we still, all of us, have to be very cautious of where our sources are coming from, where's the information coming from, and it is sad. It really is, I think, sometimes.
I don't disagree, and I think it goes back to the point you made earlier, where there's a responsibility aspect to it.
Right,
taking accountability of the news you're consuming and thinking about it and deciding for yourself, what is the best thing. Because we are living in quite an age. There are many important issues going on right now.
Exactly.
And getting, I guess, touching upon COVID, there's been so many different ways it's upended everything. Obviously, we have remote learning going on in many parts of the country. There's been economic suffering. Certainly, there's been suffering in terms of health and the direct devastation from the virus. For students, who are struggling right now for remote learning, do you have any thoughts on COVID or this moment in time and how to think about it and how to best approach what's a difficult moment? You started your career. What would be a difficult moment for the country?
Absolutely. I'd just say hang in there. Just hang in there. There's nothing like that face-to-face help that you can get from an instructor and a teacher. If I'm standing in a classroom looking at a student's eyes and I know whether they've got it or they don't. We don't really have that. It's difficult to do that online. In my work with the homebound students, we have gone to virtual learning, and it has been a difficult challenge. But I think that if we can just hang in there and get through this, get our vaccinations and socially distance for however long we need to, that certainly by this time next year we'll be back at it, and things will be a lot better.
Yeah, I think we've all realized how much we miss that person-to-person connection, and there is no replacement for it. And hopefully we are getting quite close. So
I think so too.
Yeah.
It has been very uplifting for me to see that people in nursing homes are getting vaccinated, and we can solve that problem for a little bit, and then we'll move on.
Yeah.
So that'll be great.
Great. So in your retirement, if you could just speak a little bit, what's one thing you miss about teaching? Maybe it is that student-student connection. I know you're still working part-time, and you've had a chance to work with some students as they've moved on to college and to graduate school. But what's one thing you miss about teaching most?
Well, I think just the connection with the kids. But I do get a little bit of that.
Yeah.
So because I've been working with the Scottsdale Unified School District this year, as I had mentioned before, I really have not had any students this year because everybody's virtual. So that has worked out well, and especially for them because they don't feel so much not a part of what's happening. The students that I would be teaching are students with serious illnesses, cancer, and going through treatment.
Wow.
Some students who are have anxiety, depression, those kinds of things. So, it's difficult for those kids, and having that one-on-one contact has always been very helpful. And it's actually been really quite good because I've really been able to make an impact in that student's education. And so, for me, that's been a blessing. It really has. So doing that, and then, of course, as you mentioned, the essays with, I have a lot of students who come back and need help with essays to get into college and graduate school and that kind of thing, and that's been a great deal of fun, too. Renew my relationship with those students and be able to help them in any way that I can.
Great. So we like to end each podcast with a question, and keeping with the name of the podcast, Forever Seeking. What is something in your life that you are forever seeking, and who is a saint that possesses the values that you seek to model your life after?
I think just helping others is the thing that I've really found time to do now that I didn't have when I was teaching, because I was so busy doing that. But yeah, I think so. St. Francis de Sales is kind of an interesting saint to me. It all started back when I was younger. I was just a little kid, and my father had a cousin who was a pastor at St. Francis de Sales School and parish. And so every year they used to have a carnival, and we would go to the carnival, and some of the booths were set up so that they related to a saint or related to some principle of the Catholic faith. And it was just such a fun time. And then my family talked about St. Francis de Sales and his importance as a saint. And during the Protestant Reformation, he went to Switzerland and tried to convert a number of people. And he was having no luck whatsoever. I'm talking about rocks got thrown at him, doors slammed in the face.
Oh, gosh.
The poor guy, he really had a hard time. But what he found was that if he could get to the kids and start working with them, then the adults would begin to trust him. So he did do that, and he would just find unique ways of trying to teach about the faith. He would write out his sermons and slide them under the doors, so that people would read them. And so I just have really admired his tenacity at being able to do something. He's probably pretty much known as the patron saint of journalists and writers, so that also helps.
Quite fitting.
Quite fitting, right, exactly. And so that kind of fits in, but I could really relate to his difficulty in trying to get people to understand what you're trying to tell them.
Yeah.
So there have been a few in a classroom who have not been so good as you were.
Yeah, I hope no one threw rocks or anything.
No, we were good. We were good.
Good.
We managed to keep that under control.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think that message really came through, and forever seeking truth, I guess, is one way of putting it.
Yes,
and,
yes.
That responsibility of taking account of your own life and, pursuing knowledge and using that to make yourself a better person and understand the world around you and what's going on.
And I think that if anyone says, if you've reached one person and made a difference in their life, it's been all worthwhile. So that's kind of the way I feel, too.
Yeah. Well, you have certainly made a difference in countless lives, myself included. I would not be where I am today without your help. I certainly wouldn't be the writer. Certainly wouldn't be able to approach the world I am without your guidance. So on that note, we want to thank you, Lyn, for being with us here today.
Welcome.
Thank you for all of your contributions to NDP and for your work and commitment, really, to helping kids, no matter where they are, who they are, where they come from. So thank you.
That's what life's all about.
I agree.
Okay. Thanks, Luke.
Thanks, Lyn.
Thank you, Lyn and Luke, for joining us on Forever Seeking. And thank you again to the Knockin family for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. I would like to encourage all of our alumni to stay connected with us at www.ndpsaints.org/alumni/stay-connected. We invite you to subscribe to Notre Dame Prep on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, and watch for our next episode. Go Saints!